We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 strength and health authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode.
Hi, and welcome to the Strong by Design podcast. I am your show host today, Tanya Fines, with a very special guest, Dr. David Jockers. Welcome, Dr. Jockers. How are you this morning or this
Doing
afternoon?
Great. Thanks for having me, Tanya.
Great. And thank you so much for taking the time. I know you got a very busy schedule, but thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show. I'm quite interested to talk. You have a wide and vast range of knowledge and expertise. And there's, right before we started, we're like, well, what are we going to talk about? Because there's so much we could talk about. But we're going to actually focus today on brain health and how, really making brain health a priority, kind of what that impact is and sort of that whole domino effect on our whole overall wellness and well-being and longevity. So before we jump into all that, though, give us a little bit of background. Like, how did you get here? What brought you here? How are you doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, well, growing up, I was an athlete, and my mom actually was studying. She was a nurse, but she studied to become a naturopath. So she was always into health, grew her own food, things like that. And I was into performance. And so I would ask my mom questions. She would have kale on our, dinner plate. And I would say, why do I have to eat this? And she would say, because it's going to help you have more energy and help you be stronger and this and that. And so for me, anything that would help me perform better, I was interested in. And, we're talking about brain health. And so when I got into college, I was not a good student. I actually was not a good student in high school, was not a good student in college. And I realized, man, I really need to step up my game if I want to be successful in my life. And I started doing different things to help improve my brain. I also had a lot of gut issues. I had brain fog, I had irritable bowel syndrome, and started changing my lifestyle, changing my diet. And I actually finished at the top of my class in my undergrad. And then I was second in my class in graduate school. And really had to do with these lifestyle changes and these different activities. And I'm constantly always looking for different hacks, different things I can do to improve my performance, to improve how sharp I can think, my memory, and my ability to be creative. And, I started a clinic when I came out of graduate school. I went to school for chiropractic and also studied functional medicine and functional nutrition. Started a clinic right out of school. Worked really hard, had a lot of success, had a few doctors that worked for me, and found that I really enjoyed creating online content. And so I started doing that full time, sold my clinic, and I have a great website, drjockers.com, which has tons of content. I'm on YouTube and podcasts and all that kind of stuff as well. And, it's really just me experimenting and learning more and more and more. And, it's just what I love. I love to study different topics in depth, practice them. And, and I've worked with clients, and I have a health coaching team that works with clients all over the world that are experimenting with, different functional medicine strategies and, biohacks and different things like that to get optimal results with our clients.
Yeah. Excellent. The website is phenomenal. And so before we close out the show, I'm going to make sure you tell us all the places we can find you, because I think there's going to be a lot of interest after people listening to this. So when it comes to our brains, just personal opinion here is I've always kind of felt for a lot, like when I was in university and studying health and wellness and getting into biology and things like that, I always kind of felt like I felt it kind of odd how when somebody had a physical ailment, when something was wrong, cancer and autoimmune, when it came to the physical body, people seemed much more open to talking about it, talking about the issues. But all of a sudden, when we get into the brain, it's like, it becomes this like awkward, like people are it's difficult to talk about, or it has some connotation. I don't know what it is. And yet, if our brain isn't healthy, the rest of the stuff doesn't really work that well.
Yeah, so true. Our brain really runs everything in our body. And so absolutely, it's constantly communicating. We have a bidirectional communication system in our body. So the brain is basically organizing all the functions of the body, but at the same time, we're getting feedback constantly coming up into the brain. In fact, that feedback coming from our muscles, our joints, we call that proprioception, sensory information coming from our gut, coming from our viscera. That's actually a critical nutrient, believe it or not, for the brain. So when we think about like nutrition, we think about vitamins and minerals and, protein and macronutrients and micronutrients, but actually activation, right? Sensory information is actually a critical nutrient for the brain. We have to think about it as a nutrient. That's why people that live a sedentary lifestyle, just being sedentary, you're depriving your brain of critical nutrients. So movement is especially important. And also just getting good feedback from, your viscera as well. Like if you have dysbiosis in your gut, for example, which is a bad bacterial balance in your gut, you're going to get altered messages going up into the brain that can also drive up inflammation in the brain. And so the brain's running everything, but it's also listening to the body and it's got to adapt. So we have an area of the brain, I call it kind of the neuroendocrine part of the brain, where you have your hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is like an antenna. It's constantly, got a little thermometer in the bloodstream, and it's looking for what hormones are in there, what nutrients are in there, what's happening there, and making adaptations, right? Sending out other hormones to the pituitary gland, to the adrenal glands, right? Telling those areas to produce, sex hormones, stress hormones, melatonin, right? All these types of things to help us adapt successfully to our environment. And really, the brain's all about helping us survive, helping us adapt, and helping us thrive. But survival is first, right?
Right.
And so the brain's amazing. We want to really take great care of it because it's going to help us obviously do everything in life.
Right. And I completely agree with what you said. And we've done past shows talking about how movement is such a key component to keeping the brain healthy, because this vessel was meant to move. It wasn't meant to stay sedentary. And yet with all the advancements in our lives, the ability to stay sitting and like connect with the entire world and get things done is, it's astounding, but it definitely, supports a more sedentary lifestyle. So actually being active is something that I think has to be scheduled. It has to be made or put into the schedule, because, and I'm guilty of it too. Coming into the office on a certain day where there's like some big projects going on and some really important deadlines, it's very easy to get stuck into that, to the point that I've got alarms I've been in the fitness industry my whole life, and yet I have alarms on my phone to kind of snap me out of it, to be like, you got to get up and move, Yeah. So definitely we're working on that as far as kind of getting that message out there. But when it comes to nutrition, how important is what we put in our mouth? Because there seems to, I sometimes feel like there's this disconnect. There's this, social media, we're inundated with like beautiful people, and we're inundated with, if you eat this, you're going to look like this. If you go on this diet, you're going to be beautiful and popular and smart, and people are going to love you, and you're going to be successful. So there seems to be this like feeding for the aesthetic, but then I sometimes feel like there's this disconnect in terms of feeding for the health and longevity, like for like quality of our life. Yeah. So can you talk about that in terms of feeding ourselves, our brain, for that, being able to live a really full, quality, healthy, amazing life with lots of energy?
Well, yeah, for sure. What we eat really, we recreate into our body. So it's so critical. And, my philosophy when it comes to nutrition is you want to maximize nutrients and you want to minimize toxins, right? It makes a lot of sense. And so we want to get the most nutrient dense foods with the least amount of toxins into our system. And so we got to eat healthy in order to do that. So I'm a huge fan of reducing sugars and grains. I'm more of a lower carb guy, or carb cycling type of guy, if you've heard of those types of terms. Yeah. And because we have to think about sugar, or anything that elevates our blood sugar has a toxin. You think about a diabetic, somebody that can't control their blood sugar. The sugar actually binds to proteins in the body and creates something called an advanced glycation end product, or an AGE. And those AGEs damage the endothelial lining of our blood vessels. They damage our kidneys. They damage our nerves. This is why people with uncontrolled diabetes develop peripheral neuropathy. They develop dementia. Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes. They develop optic neuritis, where they lose their vision. They have kidney failure. They die of heart disease. So the body creates this hormone called insulin in order to take sugar out of the bloodstream and put it into the cells. And insulin saves us from this sort of glycation damage. However, when insulin is elevated for an extended period of time, then insulin actually triggers inflammation in our body and also fat storage. And our cells become less sensitive to insulin. We want our cells to be very, very sensitive to the message of insulin. And high insulin is known to drive up inflammation in the brain. It activates something called the neuroinflammasome, which is like an amplification of inflammation. Think about inflammation. It's basically an immune response where the immune system starts breaking down tissue, right? And so we start to amplify that in the brain when we have high insulin over a period of time. So having good nutrition where we are keeping sugar and starch, we're keeping it down, or at least controlling the amount and the timing that we're utilizing that. And then we're really prioritizing healthy fats, good fats. The brain is mostly made up of fat. Fats are an amazing fuel source for the body. And most people are metabolically inflexible, meaning they're only good at burning sugar for fuel. Like, we should be burning fat and sugar. I mean, we are burning both of those at all times. But for most people, they're not very good at burning fat as a primary fuel source. And this is why, for some people, they go 3 or 4 hours without a meal and they are hypoglycemic. They feel dizzy, right? They can't think straight. This is metabolic inflexibility. And so we want to teach our body to be good fat burners when we are going long periods of time without food. And so one way to do that is keep sugar and starch down, which will help keep insulin down, and then eat a lot of healthy fats. And that's going to be things like olive oil, avocados, avocado oil, coconut oil, grass-fed butter, eggs, right? Grass-fed animal products, things like that, because those are nutrient dense. They are not going to elevate your blood sugar, your insulin, and they're great fuel sources.
Right.
So we're consuming that, and then ideally trying to get clean protein. So I always recommend grass-fed organic animal products as a really great protein source. You want to get grass-fed organic because you want to minimize the amount of herbicides, pesticides that are in there. They bioaccumulate when you're looking at meat and dairy that's coming from conventionally raised animal products. The actual toxic load is really high. So as much as possible, we're trying to minimize that, and we're consuming the grass-fed. When animals eat grass, particularly cows, different ruminants, and even chickens will eat like a 25% grass diet. They'll eat weeds and different things like that. When they do that, you get more omega-3 fats, you get more conjugated linoleic acid, which is really great for fat burning, for metabolic function. It's actually great for your immune system. You get a lot more fat-soluble vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, right? So all your fat-soluble nutrients in those foods. So you're looking for the grass-fed organic animal products. And ultimately, we're trying to really customize a diet that is, high in healthy fats, has a good amount of protein, because those are things that are going to create a lot of satiety. And then we want to fill it in with lots of antioxidant-rich foods. So lots of non-starchy vegetables, fruit, particularly lower sugar fruit like berries, different things like that. I eat a lot of berries on a regular basis. Very nutrient dense, lower in sugar, and herbs as well. So things like ginger, turmeric, oregano, basil, thyme, rosemary, like all those Mediterranean herbs are fantastic. Cinnamon, right? So we're getting a lot of nutrients this way. All these things help stabilize our blood sugar, keeping our blood sugar real stable, keep our insulin levels real stable, and provide really a great foundational fuel source for our body to run on.
Our team would like to thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. And if you're enjoying today's show, please share this episode with at least one friend or family member who will benefit from this message. And please subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Go to strongbydesignpodcast.com. That's strongbydesignpodcast.com. Let's get back to the show.
what you're talking about and the things that you are suggesting or recommending, these aren't weird. Like you don't have to go to some crazy place to get them. I think we're very lucky in the age that we live in is that a lot of what you're talking about, like grass-fed and organic, is even available at our regular grocery stores. Like at one time, a long time ago, you had to go to like a Whole Foods or a specialty market to get that stuff, but it's become much more accessible to all of us, much more easily. So you're talking about things that any of us can walk into our local grocery store and get. So it's not difficult to implement in terms of the resources you need. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, we do most of our grocery shopping at a local Kroger's. I live in the outside of Atlanta. And so Kroger's a popular grocery store, but it's a conventional grocery store. And they pretty much have just about everything that we're looking for. And, a wide variety of stuff. And I live in a suburb. I mean, there's horse farms out here. So it's more of a rural area, about an hour outside of Atlanta. And yet our local Kroger's is 5 minutes away, has a lot of these things. So they are accessible. If you're looking for really good bargains, there are companies you can order from, or you can order bulk,
right?
Or local farmers, stuff like that. So there are a lot of different strategies for getting the cost down for these foods, but the accessibility is definitely there.
Right, exactly. So would you say that you're a proponent or an advocate for keto being probably the best way to feed not just your body, but to feed your brain?
Yeah, for sure. So basically the brain, again, can run off of sugar. And we used to think the brain could only run off of glucose, but now we know that it can run off of ketones. You see, fatty acids, most of our cells can burn fatty acids for fuel. However, fatty acids don't effectively cross the blood-brain barrier. So they are not able to get into the brain to be able to be used as an energy source, at least not at the quantity that the brain would need them. Because the brain's really energy demanding, uses a lot of energy and burns a lot of calories on a regular basis. And so in order to get some sort of alternative fuel source for glucose, because you see our ancestors didn't have pantries and refrigerators. So our ancestors, they were feast or famine. So they would have a good harvest, they would eat, they would feast. And when harvest ran out, right, in the winter season, less food. They had a good hunt, great, they would eat, but then they would sometimes have to go days without food. And so for the human species to survive and thrive, God had to put a system in us that allowed us to get fuel without like continually eating every day. Right,
yeah.
And so what's interesting is you actually, and hunters, you actually get more drive when you go a few days, like you actually get more anabolic drive, more growth hormone, things like that when you're in a fasted state. I actually work out in a fasted state, typically like 16, 18 hours fasted, 1 day a week. I do a 24-hour fast. And then I actually work out at the end of that fast. And I actually feel amazing. I feel incredible, have great drive. And that's because to some degree, my body's hungry. And the hunger, so when you go this period of time without food, your body will actually take fatty acids, so fat from your own body, and will turn it into ketones in the liver. And ketones are smaller molecules than fatty acids. They're water soluble. They cross the blood-brain barrier, and the brain loves them. And sugar is a dirty fuel source. The benefit of burning sugar is you can do it without oxygen. You can do it quickly and without the presence of oxygen. So like if you're exercising at a real high intensity, you're going to burn sugar during that short period of time. And that's why you might feel like burn in your muscles. And that's the acid that's forming because you're burning all the sugar and you don't have enough oxygen to convert that acid back into another molecule so you can actually continue to create energy. So the acid builds up. So that's great. And that's normal part of function. And that's the way we were designed. However, when we burn ketones or fat for fuel, we actually produce significantly more energy than when we burn sugar and a lot less metabolic waste. So going back to the idea, sugar is a dirty fuel. The reason why I say that is because we do convert energy out of it, but we produce a lot of metabolic waste, a lot of free radicals. We drive up inflammation in the body when we're burning too sugar for too long a period of time. So it's counterproductive to overall health, counterproductive to good brain health. It ages us, accelerates the aging process. So for the most part, most of the time, we actually want to be burning fat or ketones as an energy source. And again, the brain loves ketones. In fact, when ketones are elevated in the brain, it shuts down that neuroinflammasome that I was talking about, that inflammation amplifier, shuts that down. It actually increases something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which increases the development of nerves and improves the gaps between the nerves. We call that synapses, and improves the sensitivity and the production of neurotransmitters. You know, we hear about years ago, you used to hear things like depression was a chemical imbalance, right? We still hear things like that. We know today it's not a chemical imbalance. It's just a dysregulated neurochemistry pattern in the brain. And so by getting ketones elevated in the brain, there's a lot of research showing we can really reverse a lot of these types of things, right? Re-regulate these things. And it's huge for neurodegenerative conditions. People are dealing with things like dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. More and more research coming out about the therapeutic effect of ketones. They even did a study where you can actually take MCT oil, for example. So the way that you produce ketones is a couple different ways. One is you can eat a low carbohydrate diet that's high in fat, what we call a ketogenic diet. And so that's a diet that's typically about 60 to 80% fat, right? As you're for counting your calories, your macronutrients, 60 to 80% fat, roughly 20 to 30% protein, and about 5% or so of your calories coming from carbohydrates, maybe 10% for somebody that's very insulin sensitive.
Okay.
So that sort of diet will help get ketones elevated in your bloodstream. So that's a ketogenic diet. You can also do it by fasting, by doing intermittent fasting, where you might eat your meals in like a 6 or 8 hour eating window, or even tighten it up and eat like 2 meals in like a 4 hour eating window. So that would be like eating at, 12 p.m. and then eating again at, let's say, 3:30. Right. And those are your 2 meals throughout the day. You're getting all your calories in that period of time. And then you've got a 20-hour fast. Right. Okay. And that's definitely going to get your body producing ketones and getting those elevated. So that's a way. Intermittent fasting, or doing an extended fast where you do like a 3-day fast or a 5-day fast. And you could do that fast, water fast. You could do a bone broth fast or things like that. As long as you're keeping your calories really low during that fasting period, you're going to produce ketones, right? So that's another way. Another way to produce ketones, and this is really just something you can implement in any sort of diet, is actually using MCT oil, particularly C8 only, where you have different types of medium chain triglyceride fats. And these come naturally in things like coconut oil. Yeah. But coconut oil is higher. It's only about, I think it's like 8%, 8 or 16% C8. So it's not as high in that particular, and C8 meaning 8 carbon chain fat. It's called caprylic acid. It's not very high in that. It's mostly lauric acid. And lauric acid doesn't turn into ketones as quickly, but the C8 only MCT oil, which you can go on Amazon. I have one on my store we call Keto Brain. And basically this type of MCT oil, you can just actually add to food and it turns immediately into ketones and helps regulate insulin levels in your bloodstream. Now, I still don't recommend like a super high carbohydrate or I
was just going to ask that.
But it does give you a little bit of buffer and leeway. In fact, there was a 2007 study where all they did was added MCT oil. And this was probably a combination of C8, C10, and C12 they went into a nursing home, and they had all these people with dementia and or different forms of dementia. And they had them fill out a questionnaire, basically a cognitive scoring questionnaire on the front end. And then they added in MCT oil to their meals. That's all they did, in assisted living, nursing home, they have to feed them real healthy foods. And then they tested it again 30 days later. And all these people had significantly improved scores on their cognitive assessment. And that's all they did, right? And it's like tasteless, right? The oil. Right. The only thing is if you take too much too quickly, right? You got to
be close to the bathroom.
Right? So I always recommend starting people small. You start out with like a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon.
Right.
and you gradually work your way up. You see what your bowel tolerance level is.
Right.
But, those are ways of, and then exercise also really helps with this too, because exercise helps drive down your blood sugar, improve your insulin sensitivity. So, exercise, obviously you and I are both advocates. That should be a part of everybody's lifestyle, regular movement, and then some sort of, I always differentiate exercise and movement. Movement is something we all should be doing really as much as we can throughout the day. And that's just walking and
just getting up and moving. Just get up and move.
Exactly. Exercise, I consider something that's more high intensity, right?
Yeah,
so
it's more intentional.
More intentional burst training. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Resistance training, things like that. So all of that, is going to help you get into ketosis. Now, there are some other factors. If you're not sleeping well, if you're under a ton of stress, that's going to impact your blood sugar and not allow you to get into ketosis. But yeah, as a baseline, getting your body into ketosis is one of the most powerful things you can do for your health. Now, the question comes, do you need to be in ketosis all the time? Okay. I don't think you do. I would say most people would say no. Our ancestors weren't always in ketosis.
Right.
It's just a part of a lifestyle, though. We're going in and out of ketosis, throughout the course of a week, a month, right? Picking your various times where you really want to get into ketosis, maybe a deep level of ketosis, maybe a real mild level of ketosis. Maybe you're not even in ketosis, for a day or something like that.
Right.
And you're just kind of picking that, but you do want to be intentional about getting your body into a state of ketosis for at least a period of time on a regular basis.
So here's what I really like. You said you gave a lot of really great information, but here's what I like, and I want to pull it out of that so that we can break it down into something very user-friendly for our listeners. Because a lot of times in, hearing about keto and fasting and all of these things that are really good. And I think most people want to do what's best for them. I think people want to feel good. They want to get good sleep. They want to be able to maintain a healthy weight. People want to be healthy and they want to feel good. And there's so much information and it tends to be delivered a lot of times really complicated. It's like, you've got to be keto and it's got to be like full on. And it can often come across as very daunting. Like I said, I've been in this industry for a long time, work in holistic nutrition. And even for myself, I sometimes look at the keto stuff. I'm like, even I don't want to take that on. That just seems like a lot of work and I have enough jobs already. And even like with the fasting, there's so many delivery systems and people saying you should do it this way, that way. But a lot of what you said, and I love that you said, do you have to be in ketosis 100% of the time? No, I think I just heard everybody go, oh, thank goodness. So what I hear you saying is there's a way to do this, to feed our brains, to keep the brain healthy, to keep the body healthy. That's actually very manageable for most of us, if not all of us, if it's something we really want to do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And, depending on the individual, like I have 2 books. I have the Keto Metabolic Breakthrough. In that book, I actually go through how to transition from a high carbohydrate diet and to actually get into ketosis, and then how to set up your lifestyle where you are carb cycling, right?
Perfect.
And by carb cycling, to me, it's like a feast famine cycling. It's more sustainable. And also there are some benefits once your body is insulin sensitive. This is key. Most people in society are more insulin resistant. They're trending more towards insulin resistance, where their bodies are not responding well to insulin. When you don't respond well to insulin, you're not as good at getting sugar out of the bloodstream. You're promoting more inflammation in the system. So the book, I go through how to get your body into ketosis, right? Staying in that therapeutic level of ketosis for, a certain period of time to get the benefits, and then how to cycle out of it. And the reason why it's so important to cycle out of it is because we actually need a certain amount of insulin. You don't want your insulin to go too low. We need a certain amount of insulin to activate thyroid hormone, to activate or, basically to reduce sex hormone binding globulin. So we get the appropriate amount of estrogen and progesterone to the cells, testosterone to cells, active thyroid hormone to cells. When we are in a state of ketosis for too long, and everybody's different, right? Some people are able to be in ketosis for a long time and they do well, but I would say that's more of the exception. For most people, if you are in ketosis for too long, right, you are going to have a poor reaction when it comes to your sex hormones and stress hormones and thyroid hormone, right? And so that's important to obviously have a system where you are going in and out, because if you're not in ketosis for a long period of time, that also is going to promote more inflammation. I think as a species, we were designed to go in and out of this sort of physiological state. And, our ancestors did it naturally. I don't have to think about it. It just was based around what food was available when, right? And so they would just eat when food was available, they were going to eat, right? And when it wasn't available, they'd fast. And during certain seasons, they would only have foods that were low carb that were available. Mm-hmm. And other seasons, they would have foods that were high carb that were available, right? And so they just ate what was available.
Ate in season, yeah.
Yeah, but in our society today, we have to be a little bit more intentional about it. Try to make it as easy as possible in the book. We also go through a lot of biohacks because a lot of people struggle with producing enough stomach acid. In order to digest a steak, for example, your stomach acid, so, just a quick chemistry lesson, basic, or I should say neutral, is 7.0 on the pH scale. At rest, our stomach acid levels are about 3 to 3.5. To be able to break down protein, particularly like red meat, we have to get that stomach acid level down around 1.5 to 2.2, which is actually very, very energy demanding. It takes a lot of energy. And in our society, we're eating on the go all the time. We're stressed out. We have poor, what we call vagal tone. Vagus nerve is a nerve that runs from our brain down to really all of our visceral organs. One of its jobs is to help activate the digestive organs and activates the production of stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes. And so for some people, they're not producing enough stomach acid. So they eat a steak or something like that, and they have acid reflux. They feel nauseous. They are bloated, right? They have more inflammation in their system. So we need to get that acid really low. This good quality stomach acid actually helps sterilize food. So it helps get rid of, pathogens that are coming in on the food, breaks down proteins, activates the absorption of key minerals like zinc, iron, magnesium, calcium. It also helps act to our absorption of vitamin B12. All these things are super critical. And it also allows the food to now move into the small intestine. It allows for good bile flow because bile is alkaline. So we should have a acidic bolus, which is basically digested food that's partially digested from our stomach, should be acidic going into the small intestine, triggers certain receptors where the alkaline bile comes out, starts to emulsify the fats, but also helps create a more alkaline environment in the small intestine, which is important. And also your pancreas releases bicarbonate and digestive enzymes. If you don't get that right amount of acid in the beginning, you're not going to get the right amount of bile flow, the right amount of digestive enzymes. And now you're not going to be able to digest your food effectively. You're going to end up with more, a higher microbial fermentation that takes place, more gas, bloating, right? Yeah. A lot of unwanted symptoms. And so in the book, I go through a lot of different things you can do, like chewing ginger before your meal, taking a little bit of apple cider vinegar, before a meal. We talk about how different supplements can help impact these things because you really have to optimize your digestive health.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. To help our show reach more listeners just like you, please let us know how we've changed your life by leaving a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Go to strongbydesignpodcast.com. That's strongbydesignpodcast.com. Let's get back to the show.
We also want your body to adapt to stress effectively. If you're overwhelmed by stress, not sleeping well, then diet change can be helpful, but you're not going to get the full results, right? So you really need to be able to dial that in. And then, you want to be able to strategically add carbs in as well. And so I talk about the proper timing for that, right? And the proper carbs to add in. Like my body really does well on berries. So, and I actually do really well. I am able to consume more carbohydrates in the summertime. When I'm getting good sun exposure. Sun exposure itself actually helps improve insulin sensitivity. And you think about it, berries, they're loaded with things like anthocyanins and oleic acid, which are really great for helping buffer the damaging effects of radiation, right?
Right.
So berries are a great carbohydrate source, carrots, right? Root vegetables, things like that. And so different seasons can actually offer, times where these foods are more available. And then also your body might respond better to these types of foods at certain times of the year, or also based on your activity level, certain times of the day. So I go through a lot of that about that in the book.
Okay.
And then I do a deep dive in my other book, The Fasting Transformation, all about intermittent fasting, extended fasting, and partial fasting. And again, just like keto, one of the big things people will ask me is, if I do intermittent fasting, do I have to do it every single day? And, it really depends on you. Like for me, I feel great with it, but if I didn't feel great, then I wouldn't be doing it every day.
Right.
And so there are some, particularly the toughest demographic to do intermittent fasting with. And also this is the toughest demographic, or at least this is the demographic that needs to be very sensitive about strategic carb cycling, is your young menstruating females who are already thin, very active, right? And also have a stressful life. They have kids or a career.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And this is because, women in particular have a certain threshold of body fat. And when they get under that threshold, their body starts to shut down in a sense, right? Like it's shutting down fertility. So you get lower amount of estrogen, progesterone, and then your hair starts falling out and you feel awful. Your thyroid, you're not getting enough active thyroid hormone to the cells. So you feel super fatigued. So for a lot of these women, what we'll do is something called crescendo fasting, where I always recommend doing a 12-hour fast between your last meal and your first meal. Okay. So if you finish dinner at 7 p.m., you wouldn't eat again until 7 a.m. the next morning. You wake up, you start your day with drinking a lot of water, hydrating your body well. What I find is most people do great, once they get intentional about it. It's really 12 hours is really more of a it's really more of a mindfulness practice, right? All of us can really do that. It's just more of a mindfulness practice, unless maybe you're pregnant, nursing a newborn, something like that. You may not be able to do it, but for the most people can do this. Then when you hydrate, so when you wake up in the morning, you're already dehydrated because we've been breathing out water vapor all night. So we really need to hydrate our body well. And if you're used to eating a big breakfast in the morning, you've actually conditioned your body to desire a big breakfast. We have a hormone called ghrelin that's released by our stomach, and it's released based on when we're normally eating, the timing patterns that we're normally eating. And then also it's released when there's nothing in the stomach. So by drinking water, you can actually distend your stomach, you reduce the ghrelin, and it pushes out, because you're not necessarily really hungry. You actually have a lot of body fat that you can tap into. You've conditioned your brain to think that way. So if you hydrate well and do like some salt water, and I also recommend some warm beverage. It could be herbal tea. Herbal tea is a great idea. Could be coffee if your body responds well to a good quality black coffee or something like that. Warm beverages actually stimulate your vagus nerve, and that's going to help calm you in the morning, give you better focus and concentration. It's going to help bring down some of the stress hormone. You actually want a certain amount of stress hormone, like cortisol is highest in the morning, gives you more alertness, productivity, things like that. The warm beverage is going to help basically modulate or balance that. And then on top of that, it's also going to help stimulate peristalsis in your gut so you can eliminate. Having good poops, your large intestine is most active between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning. You want to make sure you're having at least 1 to 2 really good bowel movements that period of time. That's going to help get rid of a lot of pathogenic waste in your system, reduce inflammation in your body, make it so much easier to do everything in your life after you do that. So you start your day like that. You drink warm beverages. And then I find that most people have no problem doing a 12 to 14 hour fast. Taking it from 14 to 16 can be a whole nother level. So what I like to do with people is start them out really just like 2 days a week, non-consecutive days, and on non-workout days to begin with, right? For this sensitive demographic. So let's say you did intermittent fasting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, where you did a 16-hour fast and ate your meals in an 8-hour eating window. And on those days you may walk, but you didn't do any sort of intense exercise. Now we're slowly introducing that stressor. Fasting is a stressor, just like exercise, right? So if you're sedentary and then you go in the gym and, you do one of Tanya's workouts here, you're going to be sore the next day, right? Like that's normal. Right. Now we wouldn't say because you were sore, you shouldn't say, oh, exercise is terrible. This is horrible. I will never do this again. Right. We understand in our society that was a normal adaptation. and you might need a few rest days, recover, right? And then do the workout again. Your body's going to acclimate. It's going to get better at recovering. It's going to create more endogenous antioxidant systems, which are a powerful way we become more resilient in life. And you're going to get fitter and healthier and feel better. But it's going to take a little bit of uncomfortability to get there. Well, it's kind of the same thing with fasting. Fasting offers so many incredible benefits for cellular cleanup, insulin sensitivity, getting our body into that state of ketosis, like I was talking about, stimulating stem cells, increasing human growth hormone, which is our quintessential anti-aging hormone. But it's a stressor, right? So if we do too much too quickly, we're not going to feel bad. So you got to slowly introduce that, and you don't want to stack it with other stressors. Not at first, right? Until you've adapted to it. Then once you've adapted to it, then you can play around with it, right?
Right.
I find that most men have no problem doing fasted workouts, right? I thrive with it. And a lot of women do as well, depending on, how much fasting and exercise they're doing and how well they're sleeping and balancing all those things. But working out at the end of a fast really offers a lot of great benefits because you have high levels of growth hormone. You already have ketones, right? So your body actually gets better at using ketones. You don't need as much oxygen because you're burning ketones along with the glycogen, but you're not solely running off glycogen. You're in a sense dual fueled, right? So most people when they're working out, if they're working out in a fed state or not in a state where they're in mild ketosis, they're relying on burning glycogen as their primary fuel source. Right. And you're going to need a lot more, or you're going to basically you're going to end up creating more metabolic waste, right? And you'll have to recover with more oxygen after that, more oxygen debt. Whereas when you're able to utilize the ketones, you're dual fueled. And the ketones, you actually don't need the oxygen to break down as well. So you're able to have less post-exercise oxygen consumption. So you're able to recover between sets better. There's just a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah.
So a lot of great strategies, a lot of good stuff that we just went through.
No, this has been very interesting. A lot of information. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are probably very anxious and wanting to hear. You need to tell us where to find you, like online. You have a great website, lots of free information and content there, but you've also got a store with some fabulous products. You've got your book. So blast us now, all of the places where we can go to find you, to get your books, to get your products, and just to learn more about everything you've been talking about today, because you do deliver it in a very as I like to use the word, user-friendly. It's listening. It's like, this is something that's very applicable and easy to implement on, as a progression. So where can we find you and get your stuff? Yeah, you can find my website, drjockers.com. And then of course I'm on all the social media channels. I have my functional nutrition podcast where I interview all kinds of experts like yourself, Tanya, and others on a lot of these topics, and also do a lot of solo training episodes as well on Functional Nutrition Podcast, and YouTube, Dr. David Jockers, and then, your different social media channels as well. Okay, great. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I do want to have you back again because I mean, like I said, you deliver it in a way that I think a lot of people, even if they're have not paid a lot of attention to nutrition and just the how-tos that sometimes get scared by these big labels, you make it safe. You make it sound very safe, and something that if somebody's been thinking about fasting, now listening to you think, well, I can do 2 days a week. I can start there. So I'm so happy that you were able to be on the show. I do want to have you back. For those of you listening, please make sure, check out the show description for those links. You can find Dr. Jocker and all of his information in his channels and social media platforms, as well as his books and products. Please give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. And always share this episode with someone that will enjoy it and find it very useful. Thank you again for listening. I am Coach Tanya here with Dr. Jockers. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Be healthy.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.